Welcome to this lesson on how to approach technical writing. In this lesson, we will cover one of the basics, how to write for an international or global audience. This approach is important to the effectiveness of technical writing and can be a different mindset than the kind of writing you do for typical email or social media. When you write for an international audience, you should have translation and localization in mind. Translation and localization can be very expensive for a company. If you are careful of the words that you use, you can cut down on the cost of translation. Let's look in this lesson at how this is possible. After completing this lesson, you should be able to describe how to approach writing for an international audience and name 5 good techniques to prepare English text for translation. Localization. The concept of localization is important to a company that wants to sell successfully throughout the world. It involves not just putting information into the language of a population. It also involves adapting products, services, and documentation to meet the needs of a language and culture. Technical writers should keep the idea in mind as they prepare instructions, noting that a best practice is to adjust their deliverable to not just the language, but also the culture and political and legal differences of a market or country. If a company operates in a global marketplace, localization can become a factor as language translators adapt content to a target country. The translator cannot create a great document in, say, Chinese, if the source document is poorly written, so technical writers should always remember this. We can also mention that a whole product team that includes the technical writer and translator should keep in mind the example of the Chevrolet Nova. Since Nova literally means doesn't go in Spanish, GM decided to change the name for the Spanish-speaking world and sales improved. Writing tips. Here are some writing tips adapted from what IBM encourages to be sure information is clear for an audience throughout the world. 1. Keep sentences short and under 25 words per sentence. 2. Make lists complete so that they can stand alone. 3. Use a complete sentence to introduce a list. 4. Use a parallel construction for lists. 5. Do not use Latin abbreviations. 6. Do not use slang or jargon. 7. Avoid metaphors and do not use humor or sarcasm. 8. Avoid negative phrasing such as not and unlike. 9. Avoid ambiguity. And 10. Be consistent in tone. Grammar tips. To make for a more accurate translation and international audience understanding, use these grammar tips. 1. Use active voice. 2. Use the present tense. 3. Avoid noun strings. 4. Make the subject of a verb phrase clear. 5. Avoid ambiguous pronoun use. 6. Avoid the use of many prepositions in a sentence, as in this example. An example of too many prepositions would be, this is a list of the status of all events in the monitor. An example of an improved sentence would be, this lists the status of all monitor events. Terminology tips. Here are some ideas to make terminology easier for a global audience to understand. Use a glossary to define terms. Be consistent in use of terms. Define abbreviations. Use standard abbreviations. Explain product-specific terms. Punctuation tips. Here are some ideas to use punctuation effectively when you write for an international audience and want to avoid confusion for the translator. 1. Avoid the use of and or. 2. Do not use s to indicate the plural. And 3. Do not use a / to mean and. More business writing for an international audience. Here are some ideas about how to write an effective message for an international audience. Think global from the start. Imagine what your audience has in common. This can include what is taught throughout the world in, for example, a business or engineering school. You can mention understood concepts such as productivity. 2. Keep communication clear. A good practice is to write first, then get input from a review. Include members of an international audience when you do your review. 3. Be clear on dates and times. Consider the use of a 24-hour clock when you mention times such as 3 p.m. or 1500. Spell out the month and day as 2-4 can mean February 4th or April 2nd. Number 4. Be clear on numerical values. For example, in French, the following number translates to $4,222,222 in English. Number 5. Leave room for translation. Many organizations leave an extra 30% of space for translation. A language such as Spanish can be longer than an Asian language, where one character can represent several words. Simplified technical English. Some companies follow the rules of simplified technical English, which was developed to cut down on problems associated with translation from English into another language. Here is a summary of the rules. 1. Make a noun string no more than 3 words. 2. Keep sentences to under 20 words. 3. Keep paragraphs to under 6 sentences. 4. Use no slang. 5. Use no jargon. 6. Make instructions specific. 7. Use simple verb tenses, such as present, past, and future. 8. Use active voice. And 9. Make steps in a process, each a sentence. Let's review. In this lesson, we looked at a basis in good technical writing, which is to write for an international audience with localization always in mind. We looked at tips regarding writing, terminology, grammar, and word use. Finally, we looked at simplified technical English and the rules related to its use. You should now be able to explain how to approach writing for an international audience. Name 5 techniques that represent good writing in English to prepare for translation. Now, good luck as you proceed with your writing projects and keep localization and translation in mind, and thank you for watching this video module.